Hey there, this is Perch, and this is a question that somebody said they wanted me to address, and topic very specific on the nose topic. I've got to get more DC fans here looking at my channel because a lot of the people want to know about Marvel and Marvel as what everybody talks about. So um, give me some DC topics, please, or Image or anything that's something else. But today the topic is Magneto, and specifically do I think Magneto should be a villain again, or what happened? Why was he made into a hero, and was that a bad move? And what do I think's best, hero or villain? Well, and this is kind of spinning off, I think, the villain video I did on the importance of villains, and so I think in my opinion, I'll give you the answer first. I think that there's a lot interesting that you can do with Magneto as a villain right now, and I treat him as a villain. Um, Now, let me back into that answer a little bit. So, Magneto, if you look back at the comics of the 60s, the X Men, and kind of how he was represented a lot initially, he was a very classic kind of comic book villain, a lot of speeches, a lot of kind of very little nuance. And yet he had the backstory that people could get into around his heritage and kind of how he'd been persecuted. And the concept was very, very strong and nuanced for a villain, where he was basically endured these horrors in his past, and it led him to the worldview he has today, where cooperation between, in this case, human and mutant are impossible. That it's not something that could ever happen between the two races. And that was an interesting concept because it gave some dimension where he was a bad guy doing bad things, sinking Russian subs, and everything else that has happened over 20 years or so of really villainous acts. And yet there's a tragedy, there's a meaning to how he got there. I like that dynamic. I like that you can have villains that are just straight up villains. You can have villains that are just have become so during different worldview, and it challenges the heroes to be better, more on point, question what they do, and really kind of stand up for what's right. I think the ambiguity of Magneto made the X Men and Professor X and a lot of the characters who made up the team better as a result, because especially when we got into the Claremont era and kind of beyond, where we really started looking at Magneto in different ways and kind of how he was treated. And eventually, of course, following along the whole X-Men history, he became a hero and then kind of back to being a villain again, and then kind of died and reborn and then villain and then hero, and now he's kind of mean hero. It's they've gone a little bit too far into the gray, where Magneto needs to kind of take a stand and do something, but look at that 20-year view again. But the nature of Magneto as a villain, I think, always made the X-Men team better. I think his run as a hero when he was leading, in fact, the X-Men for a while and New Mutants, and kind of that dynamic between teacher and student, and will he be tempted by his background and all of that. Those are also fascinating storylines. I think it gave a real edge to the X-Men that was a good edge, and it's interesting as a character. You never quite knew what he was thinking. You never quite knew the direction he was going to go in, because he was written as so conflicted that him backsliding into kind of more villainous ways or working with people that he normally wouldn't were interesting. So I would have Magneto be a villain. I think he was interesting in that role. I think he was strong in that role, and I think he really did a lot for the characters. How you do it? Well, that's take a talented comic writer, of which there are many, I'm sure, who could figure out how to make him a villain. But if you could come out with a really kind of dangerous, almost tragic X-Men story where you've got this huge family, huge roster, and you could start to disintegrate it, not the way Grant Morrison did toward the end of his run, but more in terms of the original conflict of Magneto has a way that he thinks right, and that way is his ideology, and really lean into that ideology and what it means and how it all kind of unfolds. I think that's pretty interesting stuff, and I think it's a chance to take a lot of the other supporting characters, the other X-Men that have been around, this large family, and start to break some of them off as well. You can make some interesting villains out of them. You can make some interesting conflicted heroes out of them, and really push the idea of they're fighting for survival, and their time is ticking, and it's a dangerous world. And how can all these pieces be put together? I think there's some interesting stuff there, and I think you get more out of Magneto as a villain as a result. So that's what I would do. So nice and short video. I don't know. Magneto's he's a good villain. He's a good character first, and the villainous acts become all the more tragic because you do know that here's somebody who's thinking about something from a different perspective. It's not just the wahaha take over the world stuff. There's actually a belief, a very strong belief that this is kind of the history and the actions he's been backed into because of his past and his very, very tragic past, and the horrors he endured. I think if you're actually going to take contemporary writing, it wouldn't work. Probably wouldn't work in the environment we have today. But you have a lot of the dynamic of the anti-fascist who's become the fascist, who's actually, the kind of Antifa going to, stop fascism by any means, and those means may become violent. So I think that there's an interesting parallel to be drawn with Magneto, where he's, trying to get for peace. He's lived through the horrors of Nazi Germany and what's happened. And now he's taking matters too far, and he's committed himself so far that he's doing actions that maybe children confronted with his violence will set them on a path for their whole life, like he was set on. So I think there's some interesting things to play with current events that could be pretty nuanced and pretty powerful. It would take a very good writer, it would take a very delicate hand, and it would take some patience to make the X-Men that kind of dangerous, edgy title that it was for so long. Anyway, hope you like this. Give me your thoughts. What do you think? Hero, villain, neither? Maybe it's time to kill off Magneto so he can be reborn 5 years from now again. That's always fun. Go ahead and subscribe if you're interested. Share with a friend. Hit notification if you want to be notified when these videos come out. And suggest topics, like I say. Would love to hear your ideas, especially if they're about DC. Please, let's get some DC stuff. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.